He was broke, he was broken. He owed the U.S. government $32 million. They took his house. They took his royalties. They even took a lock of his hair, auctioned it off like a circus relic. At 57 years old, most men would have vanished. But Willie Nelson, he just smiled, picked up his guitar, and said, "Let's make a record." That's not just a story. It's a testament to a man who refused to be broken. A man who was rejected by Nashville, fired from radio jobs, divorced 4 times, arrested over a dozen times, and still became one of the most enduring icons in American music, not because he followed the rules, but because he rewrote them. This is the full, unfiltered, 10,000-word story of Willie Hugh Nelson, songwriter, outlaw, activist, poet, and legend. From the dusty fields of Texas to the Grammy stage at 90,000, this is the journey of a man who lived every word he ever sang. Willie Nelson was born on April 29, 1933, in Abbott, Texas, a tiny farming community in central Texas with a population of fewer than 500 people. The Great Depression had gripped the nation. Money was scarce. Jobs were harder to find than rain in August. Life was simple, hard, and shaped by faith, family, and work. His parents, Ira Douglas Nelson and Myra Marie Greenhaw, were young and struggling. Ira worked as a mechanic and blacksmith, but the work was inconsistent. Myra took odd jobs when she could, but the marriage was strained, and when Willie was just an infant, his parents separated. Soon after, they both left Abbott entirely, leaving Willie and his older sister, Bobby, in the care of their paternal grandparents, Harrison Nelson and Margaret Nancy Nelson. They were strict, religious, and poor. William was a Methodist minister and ran a small grocery store in town. Nancy cooked, cleaned, and taught the children the value of discipline and hard work. Their home had no electricity, no indoor plumbing, just kerosene lamps, a wood stove, and a well out back. But there was music. William played the guitar and led hymns at church every Sunday. When Willie was 6 years old, his grandfather handed him a second-hand guitar. Its finish chipped, its strings rusted. But to young Willie, it was a treasure. He learned to play Rock of Ages, Amazing Grace, and other hymns by ear. But he didn't stop there. He listened to the radio station KRLD out of Dallas, where he heard the sounds of Hank Williams, Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys, Louis Armstrong, Django Reinhardt, and the Grand Ole Opry. He absorbed it all. By age 10, he was writing his own songs, simple ones, about love, loss, and the Texas sky. By 12, he was playing in a local band called the Bohemian Polka Band, performing at weddings, dances, and community events. He played guitar, sang, and even learned the accordion to fit in. Music wasn't just a hobby, it was his escape, his identity, his future. In high school, he formed his own band, the Texan Sand, began performing regularly. He wrote songs during class, he practiced late into the night, and he fell in love with music, and with a local girl named Martha Matthews. They married in 1952, when Willie was just 19 years old. It was his first of 4 marriages. He enrolled at Baylor University in Waco, studying agriculture on a scholarship, but he couldn't focus. His heart wasn't in farming, it was on stage. He dropped out and took a job as a disc jockey in Fort Worth, spinning records and filling airtime at KRLD and later KVAN in Vancouver, Washington. But he wasn't satisfied just playing other people's music. He wanted to write his own. So in 1960, with little more than a suitcase, a guitar, and a handful of songs, Willie packed up and moved to Nashville, Tennessee, the capital of country music. He arrived with hope in his heart and songs in his pocket. But Nashville wasn't ready for him. His voice was too soft, his phrasing too loose, too behind the beat, his style too unpredictable. Producers called it lazy. They said he didn't sound like a star. Still, he kept writing, and what he wrote would change music forever. In 1961, he sold a song called Crazy for just $50. It was recorded by Patsy Cline, and became one of the most iconic ballads in history. Crazy for thinking that my love could hold you. The song was a masterpiece, haunting, poetic, emotionally raw, and Willie, he got $50. He wrote Hello Walls, a song about loneliness, sung from the perspective of a man talking to the walls of his empty house. Fair and Young turned it into a #1 hit. He wrote Funny How Time Slips Away, recorded by Joe Tex, Elvis Presley, Al Green, and dozens more. A timeless meditation on lost love. He wrote Nightlife, a jazz-inflected country tune that became a standard, covered by Ray Charles, Leon Russell, and many others. All of these songs became classics, and Willie, he was still struggling to get his own records released. He signed with labels Liberty, RCA, Atlantic, but nothing caught fire. He recorded albums, toured small clubs, but never broke through. By 1970, he was exhausted. His second marriage to Shirley Calley had fallen apart. He owed money, he felt trapped by the Nashville system, forced to record songs he didn't write, with arrangements he didn't like, so he did the unthinkable. He walked away, he moved back to Texas, first to Houston, then to Austin. And in Austin, everything changed. Austin in the early 1970s was a cultural melting pot. Hippies, rednecks, rockers, and poets all shared the same bars and concert halls. The city embraced a new kind of country music, raw, honest, and free from the polished production of Nashville. Willie fit right in. He started playing at the Armadillo World Headquarters, a legendary venue that welcomed everyone from country singers to psychedelic rock bands. His shows became events. Fans lined up for hours. The energy was electric. He grew out his hair. He wore a bandana. He played with a loose, jazzy feel that defied convention. And slowly, a movement began to form outlaw country. Alongside Waylon, Jennings, Jesse Coulter, and Tompo Glazer, Willie rejected the Nashville system. They wanted creative control. They wanted to record their own way. And in 1973, Willie released Shotgun Willie, an album that marked a turning point. It wasn't a huge hit, but critics noticed. It was different, honest, real. Then, in 1975, came the breakthrough, Red-Headed Stranger. The story was dark. A preacher kills his unfaithful wife and her lover, then flees across the frontier, haunted by guilt and grief. The music, minimalist, sparse, just Willie, his guitar trigger, and a few instruments. The label hated it. They said it was too quiet, too strange. But Willie insisted, and when it was released, something incredible happened. It became a word-of-mouth sensation. Connected with its haunting mood, its poetic storytelling. It went triple platinum, selling over 3 million copies for the first time. Willie Nelson was a star not because he conformed, but because he refused to, and he wasn't done. In 19, he shocked the world. Again with Stardust, an album of pop standards from the Great American Songbook, songs like Georgia on My Mind, Blue Skies, All of Me, Unchained Melody. Nashville called it career suicide. Why would a country outlaw sing old pop songs? But Willie loved these tunes. His mother used to sing them. They were part of his soul. And once again, the public agreed. Stardust became one of the best-selling country albums of all time, spending over 500 weeks on the charts. It proved something powerful. Willie Nelson wasn't just a country singer. He was a musician beyond genre, beyond category. By the 1980s, Willie was a household name. He toured constantly. He recorded constantly. He lived on the road. But he also began to use his fame for something bigger. In 1985, he read a newspaper article about farmers losing their land. One man, Billy Joe Carter, wrote a letter to radio stations. "We're not asking for a handout, just a chance." Willie was moved. He called fellow artists Neil Young, John Mellencamp, and others and said, "Let's do a concert to help these people." That concert became Farm Aid. Held in Champaign, Illinois, in September 1985. It drew 80,000 people and raised over $7 million, and it didn't end there. Farm Aid became an annual event still going strong today. Over 35 years later, Willie didn't just show up. He led, he spoke, he fought. He said, "Family farmers are the backbone of America. We can't let them disappear." And to this day, he remains Farm Aid's heart and soul. But Willie's activism didn't stop there. He's been one of the most vocal advocates for marijuana legalization in American history. He's been arrested over a dozen times for possession, mostly in Texas, where laws are strict, but he never apologized. He said, "I've been smoking weed for 70 years. It's never hurt anyone. It's helped millions." In 2015, he launched Willie's Reserve, a brand of legal cannabis products. He also promoted biofuels, using his tour bus nicknamed BioWillie, running on vegetable oil to reduce pollution. He even testified before Congress in support of renewable energy. Willie wasn't just a musician. He was a visionary ahead of his time on issues of sustainability, personal freedom, and social justice. But life wasn't always kind. In 1990, the IRS came knocking. After years of bad investments, especially in a failed biodiesel company with owed $32 million in back taxes, the IRS seized everything. His home, his royalties, his master recordings, even a lock of his hair auctioned off as a novelty. The media mocked him. Headlines called him Taxpayer Zero. But Willie didn't hide. He faced it with humor and humility, and he made a plan. He recorded a new album, The IRS Tapes. Who Will Buy My Memories? He sold it directly to fans, with all proceeds going to pay off the debt. And fans responded. They bought the tapes. They bought the t-shirts. They packed his concerts. In just a few years, he paid off the entire $32 million. And he did it without selling out. He did it with dignity. He did it with music. Willie Nelson didn't just sing songs. He lived them. And the music he made didn't come from trends or studios. It came from the soil, the road, the silence between notes. To understand Willie, you have to understand where he came from, not just Abbott, Texas, but the soundtrack of his youth, the voices that shaped him before he ever picked up a guitar. He grew up listening to the radio late at night, turning the dial through static to catch faint signals from distant stations. He heard Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys, the king of Western swing, whose fiddles and steel guitars danced like firelight. He heard Hank Williams, whose voice cracked with sorrow and truth. He heard Frank Sinatra, whose phrasing taught him that timing wasn't about perfection, it was about feeling. But one artist changed everything, Ray Charles. Willie once said, "If I could sing like anybody, it would be Ray Charles." He didn't just sing, he testified. Ray Charles blended gospel, blues, jazz, and country in a way that broke rules and healed souls. He didn't care about genre. He cared about emotion, and that became Willie's philosophy. He didn't want to be a country singer. He wanted to be a musician, someone who could move between styles like a river flows between banks. That's why, decades later, when people called him an outlaw, he'd smile and say, "I'm not an outlaw. I just never followed the rules they made up." Music wasn't just entertainment for Willie. It was spiritual, he often said. "I don't know if I believe in God, but I believe in the space between the notes. That space, the silence, the breath, the pauses where emotion lives, where truth emerges." He was raised in the Methodist Church, but he never stayed confined to one doctrine. He studied Buddhism, Hinduism, and Native American spirituality. He read the Bhagavad Gita and meditated. He believed in karma, reincarnation, and the power of forgiveness, but he also believed in freedom, especially the freedom to believe what you feel, not what you're told. In 2012, he published a book called The Tao of Willie, a playful yet profound reflection on life, music, and peace. In it, he wrote, "Don't take life too seriously. It's not like you're getting out of it alive." That line, funny, wise, and deeply true, captures the essence of Willie, a man who faced pain with humor and chaos with calm. Let's talk about Trigger, his guitar. It's not just an instrument, it's a character in the story. A 1969 Martin N20 classical guitar, nylon string, with a deep, warm tone. Willie bought it in 1969 for $750 used from a music store in Pasadena, Texas. From the moment he played it, he knew it was different. It felt like an extension of his hands. It responded to his touch. It aged with him. Over the decades, Trigger has been dropped, dented, repaired, and restrung thousands of times. The finish is worn down to bare wood. There's a hole near the sound hole from years of strumming. The tuning pegs are loose. The neck is slightly warped, but Willie won't replace it. He's had offers custom guitars worth tens of thousands of dollars. He's been given gifts from Martin, Gibson, Fender. He thanks them, smiles, and goes back to Trigger. In 2018, he told Rolling Stone, "Trigger and I have been through a lot together. We've played for millions. We've cried together. We've laughed. I'm not going to trade him for anything." And it shows. Listen to any recording of Willie singing "Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground." That soft, weeping tone in the intro, that's Trigger speaking when words fail. Now, let's go behind the scenes. Few people know the real story of how Red-Headed Stranger was made. After years of commercial disappointment, Willie wanted to make an album that was minimalist, cinematic, and personal. He was inspired by a real-life murder ballad he heard on the radio. Your preacher who killed his wife and her lover. But Columbia Records wasn't interested. They wanted another Stardust. Another hit, not a dark, quiet concept album. Willie fought for it. He agreed to make the album for a tiny budget, $25,000, and record it quickly. He brought in his sister Bobby Nelson on piano, his longtime bassist, B. Spears, and a few others. They recorded in a small studio in Garland, Texas, away from Nashville's Prussia. The result was stripped down, almost haunting. Just voice, guitar, piano, and silence. When the label heard it, they were stunned. They said it was too sparse, too weird, too risky. But Willie insisted. He had one condition: release it as is, or he'd leave the label. They released it, and within a year, it sold over 3 million copies. Critics called it a masterpiece. Fans called it truth. And Willie, he proved that art doesn't need polish to be powerful. Another little-known story, the making of Stardust. After the success of Red-Headed Stranger, Columbia expected another country album. Instead, Willie said, "I want to record pop standards." Silence, then laughter. Executives said, "You're joking, right? You're a country star. Why would you sing Georgia on My Mind?" Willie said, "Because my mom sang it. Because it's beautiful. Because I love it." They refused. He threatened to leave the label. Finally, they agreed, but only if he used the same producer and band as Red-Headed Stranger, so he did. And when Stardust was released in 1978, it defied every expectation. It stayed on the Billboard country chart for over 500 weeks, nearly 10 years. It went quadruple platinum, and it introduced a new generation to songs like All of Me, Unchained Melody, and Moon River. Years later, Tony Bennetta, master of the Great American Songbook, told Willie, "You did more for these songs than anyone in decades." Willie just smiled and said, "I just sang them like I felt them." Willie's relationship with Waylon Jennings was one of the most important in country music history. They weren't just colleagues, they were brothers. They met in the 1960s, both struggling in Nashville, both frustrated by the system. They bonded over music, marijuana, and a shared belief that artists should control their art. In 1976, they released Wanted, the Outlaws, a compilation album that became the first country album certified platinum. It was a declaration of independence. The cover showed both men in black, looking like gunslingers. The title, Wanted, it wasn't just marketing, it was truth. They were outlaws not because they broke laws, but because they refused to obey the rules of the music industry. They demanded creative control. They recorded their own way. They toured on their own terms, and they inspired a generation. But behind the scenes, their friendship had its struggles. Waylon battled addiction, depression, and health issues. Willie tried to help, but sometimes the road pulled them apart. When Waylon died in 2002, Willie said, "I lost my brother." The music lost its rebel heart. He still talks about him, still plays their songs, still carries his spirit. Now, let's talk about his voice. It's one of the most recognizable in music, raspy, soft, slightly behind the beat. But it wasn't always like that. In the 1960s, producers tried to fix it. They wanted him to sing louder, clearer, faster. But Willie's timing was intentional. He didn't sing on the beat, he sang around it. Like a jazz musician, he played with space, with silence, with breath. He once said, "If you sing right on the beat, it's like walking with no limp." But everybody's got a limp. That's what makes you real. That limp is what gives his voice its soul. And over the years, it's only deepened, aged like whiskey, weathered like leather, even after emphysema, even after surgeries. He kept singing. Doctors told him his lungs were at 30% capacity. He said then, "I'll sing with 30%, and he did. Willie's work ethic is legendary. He's released over 150 albums, not counting collaborations, live recordings, and compilations. He's toured every year since the 1950s, over 70 years on the road. He's played thousands of shows from dive bars to stadiums, and he still tours today. His schedule is grueling. Fly in, soundcheck, perform, fly out. At 90, he was still doing 50 shows a year. When asked why he doesn't retire, he said, "I'm retired. This is what I do in retirement, but it's more than habit, it's purpose." He doesn't just perform for fans. He performs with them. He feeds off their energy. He thanks them by name. He stays after shows to sign autographs, take photos, and shake hands. He once said, "The audience gives me life. I just give it back in song." Let's talk about his songwriting process. Willie doesn't sit down to write. He lives into songs. He writes on tour buses, in hotel rooms, on napkins, in notebooks, on his phone. He doesn't need a studio. He doesn't need a schedule. Inspiration comes in moments. Watching the sunrise from a bus window, talking to a fan who lost their job, remembering his son Billy smoking a joint under the stars. He's written songs in 5 minutes, crazy, and songs that took decades to finish. He doesn't force it. He lets it come. And when it does, he records it immediately, often on a small cassette recorder or his phone. His process is simple. Feel it, say it, sing it. No overthinking, no editing, just truth. That's why his songs feel so personal even when they're not about you. They feel like they are. Now, let's go deeper into his activism. Farm Aid is the most visible, but it's not the only cause he's fought for. He's been a lifelong advocate for Native American rights. In the 1990s, he supported the American Indian movement and spoke out against broken treaties and land theft. He performed at benefit concerts for tribes. He donated money. He used his platform. He once said, "This land wasn't discovered, it was taken." He also fought for LGBTQ rights, long before it was common in country music. In 2012, when North Carolina passed a law restricting transgender rights, Willie canceled a show and said, "I won't play where people aren't treated equally." Willie Nelson has always said, "I don't chase songs, they find me." And sometimes, they find him in the most unexpected places. Like the time he wrote Whiskey River, one of his most iconic songs, while sitting in a Houston bar, watching rain fall on the parking lot. He wasn't on tour. He wasn't in a studio. He was just waiting out a storm, sipping a drink, feeling low. The jukebox played a sad country tune. A couple argued in the corner. The neon sign buzzed, and then the words came. "Whiskey River, take my mind." He grabbed a napkin, scribbled the lines, and hummed the melody on his guitar. Later that night, no grand inspiration, no muse, just a moment of loneliness, and a song was born. That's how Willie works. Not in isolation, not in perfection. In the mess of life. He's written songs in hospital rooms, on airplanes, in jail cells, and at funerals. One of his most powerful songs, "The Wall," was written after visiting the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. He stood there for hours, reading names, touching the stone. He saw a man weeping, tracing his son's name with his fingers. Willie didn't say anything. He just watched, listened, felt. Later, he wrote, "I walked along the wall today, saw 1,000 names in stone." The song isn't political, it's human. It doesn't glorify war. It mourns loss. And that's the heart of Willie's songwriting. Empathy. He doesn't sing about heroes and villains. He sings about people broken, trying, loving, failing, surviving. That's why his music lasts. It's not about eras. It's about eternal truths. Let's talk about his humor. Willie is one of the funniest men in music, not because he tells jokes, but because he doesn't take himself seriously. When he was arrested for marijuana in Texas, Genny told the officer, "You might as well let me go. I'm gonna be back next week." When reporters asked why he kept getting caught, he said, "Because I keep smoking it." At a press conference after paying off his IRS debt, someone asked, "How does it feel to be debt-free?" He said, "I don't know. I've never been here before." And when he turned 80, he joked, "I'm not old. I'm vintage." But his humor isn't just for laughs. It's armor, it's healing. When his son Billy died by suicide in 1991, the pain was unbearable. He didn't speak about it for years, but one night on stage a fan shouted, "We love you, Willie." He paused, looked out, said, "I love you too. And my son Billy loved you too." Then, softly he added, "He just didn't know how to love himself." The crowd was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone dot, and Willie smiled through tears. That's his gift, turning grief into grace. Now, let's go back to the beginning. His grandparents, William and Nancy Nelson, weren't rich. They weren't famous, but they gave Willie something priceless. Unconditional love. They worked hard, prayed daily, treated everyone with respect. William would preach on Sundays, then fix cars on Monday. Nancy cooked for the whole town during hard times. They taught Willie that character matters more than success, and that lesson stayed with him. When he became rich, he didn't forget Abbott. He donated to the school, funded the church, helped neighbors in need. When the town lost its post office, he helped raise money to save it. He never acted like he was above anyone, because he knew he wasn't. He once said, "I didn't come from nowhere, I came from Abbott, and Abbott made me." Second, his relationship with Texas is sacred. Not the Texas of politicians or oil barons, the Texas of open roads, big skies, and quiet towns. The Texas of Bob Wills, Buddy Holly, and Townes Van Zandt. He doesn't live in Nashville. He doesn't chase Hollywood. He lives on a ranch in Spotswood, near Austin, where he can walk barefoot in the grass, watch the deer, and play guitar under the stars. He grows pecans, vegetables, and hemp. He drives an old pickup, wears the same clothes for days. He doesn't need luxury. He needs peace. And Texas gives it to him. He once said, "Texas isn't a state. It's a state of mind. And I've been in that mind my whole life." Let's talk about his writing beyond music. Willie has written 10 books ranging from memoirs to novels to spiritual reflections. His most famous is The Tao of Willie, a mix of philosophy, humor, and life lessons. But few people know about his novels. In 1988, he published Pretty Paper, a fictional story about a street musician in Fort Worth during Christmas. It's not a celebrity vanity project. It's a real novel, lyrical, emotional, full of Texas soul. He followed it with the bomb maker thriller about a man who builds bombs to protest war, and Roll Me Up in Smoke. Me When I Die, a playful, poetic memoir. His writing style is simple, direct, and full of wisdom. Like his music, it's not flashy. It's true, and it reveals a side of Willie many don't see. The thinker, the observer, the storyteller. Now, let's talk about his influence on other artists. It's impossible to measure, but here are a few names who've said, "Willie changed my life." Casey Musgraves called him the original rebel with a cause. Chris Stapleton said, "I learned how to sing by listening to Willie." Sturgill Simpson said, "He proved you can be country and still be free." Dolly Parton said, "Willie sings like he's telling you a secret." Bob Dylan said he's one of the few who's never compromised. And it's not just country, Snoop Dogg said. Willie's the realest one in the room. Metallica covered Whiskey in the Jar because Willie inspired them to explore roots music. Nora Jones's daughter, with his second wife, grew up listening to his records and said, "He taught me that music is about feeling, not perfection." Even Elvis Presley admired him. Elvis recorded several of Willie's songs. Funny how time slips away. "Love me. Today I started loving you again." And once, backstage, Elvis told him, "You write songs that feel like they've always existed." That's the highest praise. Let's go behind the scenes of Farm Aid. It's not just a concert, it's a movement. Since 1985, Farm Aid has raised over $60 million to help family farmers. But more than money, it gives them hope. Willie doesn't just show up and sing. He meets with farmers, listens to their struggles, shares their stories on stage. He's sat in tractor cabs, walked through drought-stricken fields, and held hands with families who lost everything. He once said, "A farmer isn't just growing food. He's growing dignity, and he fights for them." When agribusinesses tried to push small farms out, Willie lobbied Congress. When trade deals hurt local growers, he spoke out. He doesn't do it for applause. He does it because it's right. And every year, at Farm Aid, he closes the show with, "Are you sure Hank done it this way?" A song that asks, "Have we lost our way?" And the answer, from the crowd, is always, "We're trying to find it again." Now, let's talk about his health struggles, not his setbacks, but his chapters and resilience. In 1998, he was diagnosed with emphysema. Doctors said, "You have to stop smoking, you have to stop singing." He said, "Then I'll stop living." He didn't quit smoking, but he switched to vaporizers and marijuana, which he believes helps his breathing. He didn't stop singing. He adapted. He learned to breathe differently, to pace himself, to listen to his body. In 2002, he had a pacemaker implanted. He joked, "Now I've got a little Willie inside me." In 2008, he had hip replacement surgery. He was back on stage in 6 weeks. In 2017, he was hospitalized with pneumonia. He missed a few shows. Then he returned on crutches. At 85, he said, "I'm not dying, I'm just slowing down a little." And even now, at 90 plus, he still tours. Not because he has to, because he wants to, because the music still moves him, because the fans still need him. Let's talk about his political views. Willie doesn't align with parties, he aligns with principles. He supports small farmers, veterans, medical marijuana, LGBTQ+ rights, and racial justice. He's criticized big corporations, war, and government overreach, but he doesn't shout. He sings songs like Living in the Promised Land and Vote 'Em Out carry quiet protest. He endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020 not because of party, but because of values. He once said, "I don't care if you're red or blue, I care if you're kind." And that's his politics. Compassion over ideology. Now, let's go deep into his spiritual routine. Every morning, before the sun rises, Willie meditates. He doesn't do it in silence, he does it with music. He plays a tanpura drone, a South Asian instrument that creates a steady hum. He says it helps him connect to the vibration of the universe. Then he reads Ram Dass, the Bhagavad Gita, Buddhist texts. Rumi, he doesn't follow one path, he follows peace. He once said, "I don't know if there's a God, but I know there's a force, and it's love." He doesn't go to church, but he prays in his own way. Before every show, he says a quiet thank you, not for fame, for the chance to play. Let's talk about his fans. They're not just listeners, they're family. They call themselves Willie's family. They wear bandanas, they grow their hair, they smoke in peace. At his shows, there's no barrier. He walks to the edge of the stage, shakes hands, hugs strangers. After concerts, he stays for hours, signing autographs, taking photos, listening. He remembers names. He asks about their lives. One fan wrote him a letter saying, "Your music saved me from suicide." Willie called her, spoke for 20 minutes. He does that more than people know, because to him, music is a lifeline, and he's not just a singer, he's a keeper of hope. Now, let's talk about his legacy in film. He's acted in over 30 movies, because he's a great actor, but because he's authentic. In The Electric Horseman, 1979, he played a ranch hand who helps Robert Redford escape. In Honeysuckle Rose, 1980, he played a version of himself, a touring musician, torn between love and the road. There's a moment just before dawn on the tour bus, somewhere between Amarillo and Tulsa, when the world goes quiet, no engines, no voices, just the hum of the night and the soft breath of sleeping bandmates. Willie sits alone, guitar in hand, staring out the window. He doesn't play for anyone, he plays for the silence. And in that stillness, something happens. A melody rises, a line appears, a memory surfaces, and another song is born. This is how it's always been, not in studios, not under lights, but in the in-between, the liminal space where life slows down and truth speaks. Willie doesn't write songs to become famous, he writes them to stay alive. Let's talk about his relationship with time. Most people fear aging. Willie embraces it. He once said, "Getting old is better than the alternative," and he means it. He doesn't mourn lost youth. He celebrates earned wisdom. At 90, he said, "I'm not slowing down, I'm just moving at the right speed now." He doesn't rush, he doesn't stress, he breathes. And that calm born of decades, on the road, loss, survival, and joy radiates through everything he does. He's not trying to be young, he's trying to be present. And that presence is his greatest gift. When he sings, "Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground," he's not performing, he's remembering, he's feeling, he's healing. And the audience feels it too, because authenticity is contagious. Now let's go deeper into his daily life, not the legend, but the man. Every morning without fail, Willie wakes before sunrise. He meditates. He smokes a joint, his morning medicine. He drinks tea. He walks the ranch. He checks on the animals, talks to the garden, listens to the birds. He doesn't use a phone. No social media, no emails. He lives in the physical world, and when he writes, it's with pen and paper sometimes. On napkins, sometimes in notebooks with torn pages. He doesn't edit. He doesn't overthink. He lets the words come later. He'll play them for his band, or record them on a small cassette player. No pressure, no deadlines, just creation. And when it's time to tour, he packs light. One bag, trigger. A few changes of clothes. He doesn't need luxury, he needs motion, because the road is his home. Not the destination. The journey. Let's talk about his voice. Really talk about it. It's not just raspy, it's worn in like a favorite pair of boots. Every crack, every breath, every slight waver tells a story. Of smoke. Of sorrow, of laughter around campfires. Of singing through pneumonia, of whispering love songs to his children. And it's not just the sound, it's the timing. Willie doesn't sing on the beat, he sings around it like a jazz musician, like a poet. He'll stretch a word, pause, mid-phrase, let silence do the work. It shouldn't work, but it does, because it's human. And in a world of auto-tune and perfection, that humanity is revolutionary. He once said, "If you sing it perfect, it's not real. If you sing it with a crack in your voice, it might be true." And that's the heart of his art. Truth over polish. Now, let's talk about his influence on American culture, beyond music. Willie Nelson is a cultural archetype. He represents something deep in the American soul, the rebel who doesn't rage, but smiles, the man who walks away from power to find peace, the artist who stays free in a world that buys and sells everything. He is not just a musician, he's a symbol of independence, of resilience, of living by your own code, and that symbol has seeped into the fabric of the nation. You see it in the biker wearing a Willie shirt on Route 66, the farmer listening to Whiskey River while plowing a field, the college student smoking weed and playing Stardust on vinyl, the veteran who finds peace in the healing hands of time. Willie's music isn't just entertainment, it's companionship, and that's why it lasts. Let's go back to the IRS debt, and not just the event, but what it revealed. In 1990, when the IRS seized $32 million in assets, the world saw a fallen star. But what they didn't see was the quiet dignity with which Willie handled it. He didn't blame others, he didn't hide, he didn't beg. He said, "I made mistakes, I'll fix them," and he did. He released the IRS tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories? A raw, honest album, sold directly to fans. No label, no marketing, just music and a plea. And the fans answered. They didn't buy it because it was perfect. They bought it because it was Willie. And in that moment something powerful happened. It wasn't just a man paying off debt, it was a nation repaying a debt to him for decades of music, for standing up for farmers, for being real. He didn't need a bailout, he needed love, and love paid the bill now. Let's talk about his relationship with death. He's faced it many times. His son Billy's suicide in 1991, his own health crises, the loss of friends like Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, and Merle Haggard. But he doesn't fear it. He once said, "Death is just part of the show." He's joked about it for years. "I want my funeral to be a big party. Play the music, loud, pass the joints, and if I'm not really dead, I'll get up and join in." But beneath the humor is a deep philosophy. He believes in continuity. Energy doesn't end. He's studied reincarnation, karma, and the impermanence of form. He once told a reporter, "I don't know what happens when we die, but I know love doesn't stop, and neither do songs." And that's how he wants to be remembered, not in stone, but in sound. Let's talk about his collaborations, not just the famous ones, but the quiet, meaningful ones, like his work with Leon Russell, fellow piano and guitar rebel. Their 2010 album Face the Music was a meeting of two geniuses who refused to conform, or his duets with Ray Price, another Texas legend. They sang Faded Love together, two old friends, voices weathered, hearts full, or his work with Norah Jones, his biological daughter. They didn't grow up together, she was raised by her mother, Sue Jones, but reconnected in the 1990s. Now, they perform together often, not as father and daughter, as musicians, and that's how Willie likes it. No drama, no labels, just music. He once said, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's just two people who understand each other, and that's them now." Let's talk about his impact on language. Willie didn't just sing songs, he gave us phrases that live in the culture. On the road again, now a universal phrase for travel, freedom, escape crazy, a word forever tied to love and heartbreak because of his song, Whiskey River, a metaphor for sorrow and release, always on my mind, a phrase of regret and devotion. Now part of the emotional lexicon. He didn't invent these words, but he charged them with meaning. And now, when people say them, they carry a little bit of Willie. Let's go deep into his philosophy of freedom. Willie doesn't just talk about freedom, he lives it, and his version isn't about guns or flags, it's about inner liberation. Freedom too. Smoke what you want, love who you want, believe what you feel, create without permission, age without shame, speak without fear. He once said, "The only thing I'm loyal to is my own heart," and that loyalty has cost him. Blacklisted by radio stations for smoking pot, rejected by Nashville for his voice, mocked for his looks, his hair, his lifestyle, but he never changed, because freedom isn't free, it's earned by standing firm. And Willie has stood firm for over 70 years. Now, let's talk about his fans' rituals. At every Willie concert, something beautiful happens. Fans wear bandanas, not as fashion, but as badges of belonging. They pass joints in silence, sing every word. Clap in the spaces between songs. And at the end, when he plays I'll Fly Away, the entire crowd raises their hands. It's not a concert, it's a gathering, a church of the open road, and Willie knows it. He doesn't command the stage, he shares it. He'll stop mid-song to wave at a child, to thank a veteran, to smile at an old couple dancing. He sees them, he feels them, he loves them, and they love him back, not as a star, but as one of them. Let's talk about his final album, not because he's done, but because every album feels like a farewell and a beginning. Last Leaf on the Tree 2023 is a quiet, reflective record recorded in his home studio with minimal production. He covers songs by Beck, Tom Waits, and Buddy Holly. He sings originals about time, memory, and grace. There's no grand finale, no last bow, just a man, his guitar, and the truth. And that's perfect, because Willie has never been about endings. He's about continuation. The road doesn't end, it bends, and as long as there's breath in his body, he'll keep moving. Now let's talk about his legacy in education. Few know this, but Willie has quietly supported music and farming programs in Texas schools for decades. He's funded scholarships, donated instruments, spoken at rural colleges. He believes art and agriculture are the soul of America, and he wants the next generation to have a chance. He once said, If I can help one kid pick up a guitar or grow a crop, I've done my job. And he has. Thousands of students have benefited without ever knowing. His name was behind it, because he doesn't do it for credit, he does it for the future. Let's end with a moment. Not a concert, not an award, not a headline. Just a quiet afternoon. On his porch in SPICEWOOD.sunset.crickets. A gentle breeze. Willie sits in a rocking chair, trigger across his lap. He plays Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, slowly, softly. No audience, no recording, just him, the song, and the sky. And for a moment, time stops. There's no past, no future, just now. And in that now, everything is complete. All the pain, all the joy, all the miles, all the songs, it's all right. Here, in this moment, in this melody, in this breath, and then the song ends. He smiles, sets the guitar down, and says, barely above a whisper, damn, that was pretty.